Another list app. This one is actually going to take a CSV data set or comma separated values out of Excel and populate a rather large list. So to begin with, let's create a new Xcode project. Now this one, I decided the context would be from Pokemon, and so I got onto GitHub and I found someone had gone to the effort of creating a list of Pokemon. So it's iOS app, and then hit next. And this is going to be called Pokedex. That's fine, and we're going to use, actually we don't need core data for this one, we're just going to load the models in each time. Okay, so to begin with, we have our content via Pokedex app, so I'm going to create some structures. So I'm going to create a new group, first from selection content view, and this is going to be our views. So I'm going to turn off this sidebar, I don't need that. I'm then going to create another group. This is going to be called models. So I'm going to have two things there. Now for our models, the first thing I would also need is some data. And our data comes from, I'll jump online, Pokemon CSV from GitHub, this ARMGILLES. Created this 6 years ago, so it's about 100 or so Pokemon, with all of their types and their statistics, and some of them have type 2, some of them don't. To download it, I'm going to click on download zip. There it is. I'm then going to extract it. And there is my list of Pokemon with their CSV, with all of their data. So I'm going to drag that one, and then I'm going to drop it back into Xcode under my data file, and I'm going to copy it and add it to the target so it loads with the app. The next thing I'm going to do is have to create a model with these statistics in it. So name, type 1, type 2, total HP, etc. So I'm going to go to my models and create a new Swift file. This is going to be called, let's call it Pokemon. Notice I'm not using any special characters here. I can in the interface, but when I'm coding, I try not to use any of those, like the E with the little asterisk above it. I'm going to put the link in here, source of the CSV data. I like to reference where I get everything from, and that is from here, copy, paste. Okay, so now we're going to create a structure that kind of mirrors our data set. I'm going to call this Pokemon, and it's going to be identifiable. And we're going to have an ID as an integer. Name be a string, type 1 be a string, type 2 be a string. Now I'm assuming that he's accurately typed each of these in, and that fire is spelled F-I-R-E on each of them, that he hasn't got any typos, because otherwise we're going to have some errors. Notice I've put a space here, you don't have to. Special attack. Now I'm not using the generation, but I'll load it in anyway, it might be useful. And I'm not using legendary status either, but again, it might be useful if you want to use it. So it's identifiable, and what I'm going to do, because I'm going to import, if you have a look at it, I'm going to import each of these rows as a list of strings or an array of strings. So each time I'm importing a new Pokemon, I'm going to pass a new array into it. So when I initialize to set that up, I'm going to need some raw data as a list of string. And then basically, for each of them, my ID is going to be the raw position 0. Name is going to be raw position 1, and so on. oops, self.hp. Now the legendary is not always going to be there, so it might not convert for me. So now the other thing you can see, there's some problems with strings to integers and stuff, because we're passing in each one of them as a string and we're looking for an integer for our ID. So we're going to force it into the integer and assume that it's going to work each time. And again, it's going to throw an error or it's going to crash if it doesn't, because I'm force unwrapping. And this is going to be the same for each of these. Now with our, so that's going to be fine. And now with our legendary status, if we can get it from the 12th column in our data set, self.legendary is going to be that status. Otherwise, if we can't get it, if there's an error, if they've made like a capital T instead of a lowercase t or something like that, self.legendary is going to be false. Now, really, if legendary status is true, because if I look at my data set, they're using capitals, I need lowercase. So one way of working around it is, if it's true, then self.legendary is going to be true, lowercase. No, I don't need that. Otherwise, in any other case, self.legendary is going to be false. So it's going to handle a legendary for us as well. I'm going to rejig this actually. We're going to not reassign it, we're just going to say if the raw value is equal to true, then we're going to set it to true. Otherwise, we're going to set it to false. That's going to be much easier. And then we don't need any of this. So the next thing we're going to do is create a new file. And that's going to handle our CSV. And so we might as well call it handle CSV. And what we're going to need is a couple different functions. The first thing I'm going to do is clean up all the rows. So we're going to create a function called clean rows. And it's going to take the file and it's going to output a string. Okay, so we're going to have clean file is going to equal the file. Whoops, file. And then we can use it. So we can say clean file is going to be the same file, but we're replacing occurrences of new row with new line. And then we're going to do the same thing again, but this time, I'm going to replace occurrences of where we've got 2 new lines with just the 1 new line. Like that. And then we can return the clean file. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So let's create our load CSV data. CSV data, and it's going to output a list of files. Now, in our case, we want a list of Pokemon, and luckily we've created the structure already. So it's going to throw an error until we return our list. That's fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is create our database, CSV to structure. And it's going to be a list of Pokemon, but it's going to be a blank list. So that means that we can then return our data. And I'm just going to put a T on the end. CSV to struct, or to structure, because we're putting it into that structure from our CSV data. So that's going to be fine, even though we haven't used it. So we got rid of the error. So the first thing we need to do is to locate the CSV file. And we're looking in the bundle main path for resource, and it's going to be called, mine is called Pokemon, all lowercase, Pokemon, and it's of type CSV. And you can't see it here, but when we downloaded it, it was in the CSV format. And then because we're using a guardlet, if there is an error, we've got to handle it. Error, file not found, because we couldn't find the file. And if we do that, then we still need to return a blank list, because then we can go from there with our file path. So the next step, after we've got the file path, we know where the file is, we've got to convert the contents. And that's going to be into one very long string. And we're going to call this starter, and it's going to start blank. And we're going to do try catch. Contents of the file that we found. And then if we have an error, we're going to catch it. So we're going to print that error. And again, if we do have an error, then we're going to return a blank list. That way we're always handling, like, the app will load even if there is a problem. So when we're trying to read the contents of, we actually need the contents of the file with the file path. So if we don't have the contents of file, we get that error because it's not expecting a file path there. Okay, so we're running our data in as one big string. So next what we've got to do is we've got to clean it up. So using the new row and the new line doubles. So that's what we're going to do here. And to do so, we're going to say data equals clean rows, so that function that we just created. And we're going to pass the data in. So we're going to go data in, data out, and it's going to replace all those occurrences for us. Okay, next what we're going to do is to split that long string. So remember, all of our data is coming from here as one big string, all of this together. So what we're going to do is split it up into rows then. So in our handle CSV, we're going to split the string, the long string, I guess, into an array or a list of rows of data. Each row is a string, still a string, so we've got to split that even further. How we're going to split it is when we detect the new line. So we're going to let this be called rows, and it's going to be the data.components separated by, and then we can go for our new line. The next thing I want to do, if you have a look at the data object, we have the first line is actually just a header, so we don't want that to appear in our data set, so we're going to remove that. And that's just pretty simple. Remove first. And then we're going to loop around and split each row into columns. And so for each of these columns of data, we can then initialize our Pokemon. We can send it like a, using this init, or using the raw string, we can send it a whole series of columns of data, and it can do all of that for us and add it to our CSV struct. So we're going to say CSV columns. They're going to be the row.components, similar, separated by the comma, because it's a comma separated file. And what we're going to do is we're going to check if the columns they match the header row, or if the first row matches the rest of them, really. If let CSV, actually not even let, if the columns, if CSV columns dot count is equal to the rows dot first dot components separated by the comma dot count. So basically we're using the first row of data, this one here, because I know it looks good, it looks fine. I've checked them against each of these headings, so we have enough data objects. If they've passed us the correct number of columns, we're good to go. And it does include if the column is blank, which is fine as well. It's just that if you're missing a comma, then it won't run that line. And we're using an if statement, so we need to use the is equal to rather than the assignment single equal. Then we're going to let our line struct, and we're going to go Pokemon.init, and we're going to send it the raw data, which is the CSV columns. And then we can say CSV to struct this one here, and it's actually this list all the way at the top here. We can make that dot append, and we can append the line struct, or the single Pokemon object that we've decoded from our list, and so we can keep doing that for each of our rows and columns. That's basically it. So that's all of our CSV stuff done, and yeah, that's basically it. So you can see we've created this data. It was written to but never read. That's okay. We can leave that as is. So when I build. So let's jump into our content view. So in this view, I'll just hit resume. And for now, I'll hide the sidebar just because we're going to stay in our content view for a little while. It gives me more screen space so I can see what I'm doing. We're going to have a @state variable called Pokedex. It doesn't really have to be @state in this case because it's not updating the view. We're not changing the view after we've read it. And that's going to be a list of Pokemon. And then for each Pokedex item, I'm really going to say that's going to be called a Pokemon. Notice the lowercase. NavigationLink. And so this Pokemon is actually, it's lowercase. That indicates to me as a developer, it's going to be one of these, but it's not uppercase, it's not the type, it's actually got the data in it. It's a variable. So we're going to create this navigation link, and for the moment, the destination is going to be blank. So we're not going to have a destination for a navigation link. And inside of that, we're going to put a horizontal stack. And this is going to have, and we're going to have in there, that horizontal stack text, and we're going to have the number of the Pokemon. Now for that, I'm going to add to that the string of the Pokemon.id, but that's only going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and Pokemon are numbered 001, 002, etc. So I'm actually going to format it. And the format that I'm using, if I make this a little bit wider, the format that I'm going to be using, I can't spell destination. Cool. And so the format that I'm going to be using is going to be %03D, so it's going to be the whatever value, but it's going to have 3 digits basically, and if it doesn't have a digit, it's going to make a 0. And let's do a font subheadline, And let's have the text of the Pokemon name, which is already string format, so I can just leave it like that. And I recall making that an uppercase N. It's going to be font headline, so it stands out a bit more. And let's put a spacer in, and then we're going to create a reusable view for our type, so that'll come a little bit later. Now you can see we've got a problem here with our content view because we're missing our Pokedex. So what we can do is we can load our CSV data in here, and that will generate our list of Pokemon for us. Now on that, we're actually going to have to do the same when we load the app, because at the moment it hasn't loaded. So I'm going to do that when we load our app up. So I'm going to go up to Pokedex app, and very similarly to our preview content, it's actually in fact that similarly. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it in here in our content view. So that way, and that'll get rid of this error too. So that way when we build and run, it'll actually load the data and it'll put that in that Pokedex list. So now our preview should actually work as well. There we go. So the last step, I'm going to create that reusable view. So down the bottom here, ideally you would put it in a new view, but for now we don't have to bother with that, just because it's only being actually it is being used in some other screens as well, but that's okay. So it's going to be it's going to be very similar to this one. Struct. Let's call this reusable type view. And it's going to be of type view, and we've got our var body some view. And for now, let's put some text in it, just so that we have something there, so it doesn't throw an error. And now for our reusable type view, I want to know what type of each Pokemon is. So let's create a variable called this Pokemon type, and it's going to be a string format. And the reason why is because when you look at our Pokemon structure, the Pokemon types, type 1, type 2 are string. Okay, so then what I can do is I can use this reusable type view up here. And the Pokemon type is going to be Pokemon.type1 to begin with. Just going to make it smaller so you can see it's all on one line. And so that won't really show anything in the preview just because it's got a blank string. And then if the type 2 is not blank, Pokemon.type2 is not blank, then we're going to do the reusable type view again, but this time with Pokemon.type2. And I'm going to make that just a little bit narrower so you can see that's also on one line. That's pretty much it. The only other thing I'm going to do is in my list, so in my navigation view still, so if you can double click on that, you want to be inside of that. And I'm going to, there it goes, dot navigation title, one of these. Let's call this Pokedex. And this is where in the coding where we can use our E like a Pokemon would. And so you can see it shows up here. Okay, so what I want to do is for each of those views, I want to have the text with the Pokemon's name, or rather the type, so this Pokemon type. And you should see my simulator should refresh, there we go, with all of our types. Now that's really large, so I'm going to go .font, .system, size 10. So it's going to make it a lot smaller. That might even be too small. Let's do size 12. No, I think size 10 looks good. That one doesn't matter too much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the foreground color white, which is going to hide it away for now. But then what I'm going to do is adjust the background. So I'm going to add some padding, let's say of 5 pixels or 5 points. And we can then go background. Now the background, I can actually look up the color, color, and I could go black, for example. But so there you go. But what I actually really want to do, I've set up in my assets, I've set up all the different types with their names and their official colors, which you can find online as well. So then back in our content view, I can actually look at the color for this Pokemon type with the same name. And it should, hopefully, if we've done this right, use those colors that I've predefined. There it goes. That looks fantastic. It does look a bit square though, so I'm going to add some corner radius of, let's say, 10, just so it kind of rounds them out as well. So that looks a little bit nicer as well. So that's our list view ready to go. Now what I want to do is when I tap on each of these, I want to see a little bit more about the Pokemon. We went to all the effort of pulling in all of this data, so all of these different statistics. So I want to be able to show the user that when we tap on it. And you'll notice we're using a navigation link where we don't have a destination. So basically you tap on it, nothing happens. So let's create that destination. So we're going to create a new file. And then this one is going to be called Pokemon Detail View, and it's a Swift view. Pokemon Detail View. And we're going to need to know which Pokemon we're actually using. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is add via this Pokemon to this view. That'll mean that I can then construct it for this Pokemon. I'm also going to open up the canvas so we can see what we're doing. And I don't need it that wide, so I'm going to close off this side so I get a bit more screen space and make that 75%. ID is not a string format, so to make it work I have to put it inside these brackets and then use the escape. And then I can say this Pokemon .id. And you can see down in my preview provider I've passed in for this Pokemon, I've loaded the CSV data and chosen the first Pokemon, which conveniently has a type 1 and type 2, so we can use both when we're previewing. Okay, so we've got our name and we've got our ID 1. Now I don't really like that it's a 1, it should look more like the Pokemon format, I suppose, where they have 3 digits. So I'm going to copy this text from my content view and drop it in here instead. And I'm just going to replace Pokemon with this Pokemon. And so now our ID has got 3 digits and the number beforehand, so that looks more Pokemon featured. So I'm then going to create another horizontal stack that's outside of this ID horizontal stack. So you can see there it is there. This one is going to have the name and then a spacer, and then I'm going to go text this Pokemon.name, which is conveniently in a string format already. And so there it is. So from here, I've got my 2 horizontal stacks for our ID and our name. So I'm going to collapse this section. I'm going to create another section. This one is going to be type. And there it is, just here. So then we can put a horizontal stack in. And we're going to use the text type 1, which is unfortunate if the Pokemon only has one type, it'll just say type 1. A spacer, and then I'm going to use my reusable view that I've created before. And I'm going to say this Pokemon.type1. And so you can see it should appear here. There it is, beautiful. And then similar to in our other view, if this Pokemon has a type 2, which is to say that it's not blank, oops, that's a P, then we're going to copy and paste that line in, and I'm just going to replace type 1 with type 2. So then, lucky for us, Bulbasaur does have a type 2, but I actually want to have basically this whole horizontal stack as well. So I'm just going to paste that horizontal stack in, change this to type 2, and change that to type 2. And that should look a little bit more, yeah, that looks better. So we've got our type, so I'm going to collapse this section, and we're going to add our third and final section, which is all about the statistics. Let's call it stats. And we're going to have again, a horizontal stack. And this one is going to have the total, and a spacer, and the text, and we're going to go, oops, this Pokemon dot total, and remember, because total is an integer format, so I'm putting it into the string using the escape character. So we've got our total, Now what I want to do is I want to create a table acrossways rather than down a bullet total stats, because otherwise it's going to be crazy. So to do that, I'm going to create a vertical stack. And our statistics are going to be, let's start with, actually, you know what, let's jump into our data, and I'm just going to use our total, attack, defense, and speed. So I'm going to go back into my Pokemon detail view. I'm just going to drop these in here, and we're going to delete them as we go. Text total, text, and these are all integer format, this Pokemon.total, and then what I can do, I'm actually going to move this out because, oops, because then I can copy and paste this vertical stack. So this is for our total, paste, 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 and so then we can do our HP, cut. Actually, I've already got my total there, so I don't need it again. So then I've got my HP, and then I've got my attack, and then I've got my defense. I'm not going to worry about special attack and special defense, but I'm going to put speed in, and that will do me for now. If you end up putting more than a few items into your horizontal stack, I think the maximum used to be 7, now it seems to be a lot more, but I think if you go too many items, it will cause an error. And you'll probably get that if you put your special attack and special defense in. There they all are. And so in that case, you would have to put in like a second horizontal stack or a second vertical stack to contain them all. Now I'm going to put a spacer in. Now that's going to occupy all of the remaining space, but watch what happens as I add more spacers in. They will actually even themselves out, so you can see they've evened now. And then if I put one more in here, they should kind of space very nicely. There you go. So that view is ready to go. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this last section like that, and I'm going to apply to my list a navigation title, which won't show up in this view because we're looking, basically the content view creates the navigation view, and we're going to pass into here from the destination, which you can see I've already added in here, but we haven't added that in yet, so you might as well add it in. So destination, we had those squiggly brackets, but they were empty. We're passing to this Pokemon detail view, and we're passing that Pokemon in that list. It's going to go to this Pokemon, which is in here, this Pokemon, which the whole view is constructed on. So navigation title, we're going to do a couple things. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the name, and I'm going to pinch this part, including that first close bracket, copy. And I'm going to close this and close this so you can kind of see what's going on. So navigation title is going to be the pound symbol, and then 3 decimal places the Pokemon ID. Then I'm going to add 2 spaces, and in the middle of the 2 spaces is the vertical bar, which is between the delete and the return key on a Mac. Then I'm going to add this Pokemon.name. And you won't see that on the preview, unfortunately, but when we build and run in the simulator, you should see it all working. Okay, so here's a list of Pokemon. So let's choose one like Butterfree, which has 2 types. Tap on that, it opens up and says Butterfree, which looks fantastic, and you can see everything about it. And you can see type 1 and type 2. So if I go back and I choose one like Blastoise, which only has 1 type, you can see Blastoise just has 1 type selected, has the total and then the breakdown. So that looks pretty good.